Name is Graham Phelps. I'm a trainer on the foundation training team here at Expense Reduction Analysts, and I'd like to share with you some of the key points from a presentation I put together recently on the subject of sales conversion. It can be divided into two sections. The first part looks at connecting and consulting the first half of the sales or client engagement process, the second, convincing and closing. The most important thing to recognize at this point is the first part is about discovery, questioning, need development, but it must continue into the final or second phase, which is proposing and closing. The two have to be linked. It would be a waste of time and effort if too many appointments ended with a first or second meeting. So let's have a look how we do this. During the connecting and consulting phase, how you structure the meeting, who to get involved, the questions you need to use, and qualifying the opportunity are the four most important considerations. Answering objection concerns, understanding buying signals, closing techniques, and effective follow-up are more associated with the final or second phase of convincing and closing. But let's have a look at what goes wrong in client first meetings, because it's probably true that a lot of first meetings end without a definite commitment for a second appointment or a next step in the process. Here are some of the things I've spotted over the years, not just at Expense Reduction Analysts, but in the general field of sales and self-development. As you get a little more experience, you may fall into this first one of not enough preparation, relying on previous experience, winging it, taking your chances, and in many cases you can get away with it, but some cases you can't. Too much preparation, having too much information, too much you want to tell the client, making everything too complicated. Talking too much, not probing for pain and gain points. A phrase you might be familiar with is that telling is not selling. If you haven't got a hook, you can't hang your coat up. If you haven't got a problem, you can't have a solution. If you don't get the customer to clearly articulate some aspect of their business that they would like to improve, to which cost reduction or some associated area is part of the solution, it isn't going to go very far. Dale Carnegie once said, "You cannot make people do things they do not want to do, but you can make them want to do things." Most business people are focused on goals, objectives, and achievement. Make sure that you get in the slipstream of what their business priorities are. Things that begin to get in the way of those goals and achievements, obstacles and problems, are also important to highlight how your solution and the ERA model can minimize those obstacles. Number 5 is a big one. Don't ask a question about something that doesn't progress a sales opportunity or you can find out the answer to somewhere else. Switching into pitch mode too early. As soon as a client may mention a cost category, let's say printing, you go into a full flow and tell them all about the printing capability within Expense Reduction Analysts. That's the wrong way of doing it. The right way is to say, printing, I'm glad you mentioned printing. Let me come back to that. What other cost areas are of concern to you in the next 6 to 12 months? Get a menu of 3 or 4 cost categories. As soon as you switch to pitch mode, you lose the discovery model. Not allowing your client to ask you questions. Deliberately put it in the agenda. Don't tell them too much information, but turn and say, "Now, that's giving you a simple overview of Expense Reduction Analysts, but I'm sure you have a few questions." Talking past the close or the point of agreement. If you can close for a second meeting and get on with other things, then do so. not suggesting cost categories, not asking the client for their ideas of cost categories, not asking for a second meeting. It really is that simple, and not selling the benefits of a second meeting. The benefit of the second meeting might be yours, but it's not yours alone. In order for the client to want to see you a second time, there's got to be some reason for that. We'll come on to that in just a moment. Now, the 4 stages in the meeting are connecting, building rapport, bit of small talk, getting into the flow, consulting, asking questions. The first 2 should be around 50% of the meeting. Yes, you should be listening 50% of the time, with the client doing much of the talking. The final part of the meeting is the convincing and then confirming the second meeting. One of the principles of consultative selling is to only sell to the next stage. The other 3 principles are these: focus on the customer, earn the right, and persuade through involvement. Earn the right, by the way, means earn the right to be taken seriously, to be considered as a viable option. Everything you do in the client engagement process is to take the customer from doubt to certainty. In the beginning phase, there's no real interest in what you do or what you have to offer, but there may be some curiousness as you go through the capability statement, asking questions, developing needs, talking about the benefits of providing cost management, cost reduction, preventing issues, presenting how ERA works, and then gaining agreement to the next meeting. This is the key things. It's useful to have a plan. In a Teams or a Zoom meeting, you can share agendas really quickly and easily without disrupting the meeting. A typical flow of a first meeting might look like this. After a quick introduction, you move into asking the client questions about the situation they have and where ERA may fit. Then there's a little bit of quick thinking going on perhaps, and tailoring your presentation and your summaries around how we work, the 4-step methodology, and if it's appropriate, you may want to go into some terms and conditions, the 50-50, the 12-24 months, I should say, but always ask for a second meeting to present back. Now, here's an important point. Who decides whether a second meeting is worthwhile? You do. You're the consultant. You call the meeting. The way you get the meeting started is the way you get it finished. So in the first introduction, it needs to go something like this. Thank you very much for seeing me today, Mr. Prospect. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to meet with you. And as I said on the phone, the goal today is to discover more about expense reduction analysts and share with you how we find our savings. But I'd also like to find out more about your business and some of your priorities going forward in the next 2 years or so. Now, if this goes well and we feel there's some areas of mutual gain, if you like, I would very much like to come back for a second meeting, and that meeting I will present our final proposal, terms and conditions and prices. But today is really just about the 2 of us getting to know each other and seeing if there's any kind of synergy between us. Would that be okay? We agreed on the phone it'd be about half an hour. Is that still all right for you? Excellent. Now, before I share our models with you from ERA, I'd really like to ask you a few questions. Would that be okay? So that's exactly how the meeting starts. How does the meeting end? Well, you summarize and you say, well, from what you've told me today, I really do think there's some areas we can help you with, and what I'd like to do is to come back for a second meeting, perhaps in a week's time, having done a little bit more research into some of the cost categories we mentioned today, and present to you a proposal and some idea of the kind of saving, just an estimate at this stage, but also go through in more detail about how we work, our pricing, and how our project would be structured. So how's your diary looking like the next week or so? So you can see how these 2 really focus on getting that second meeting. The introduction I've just mentioned is structured like this. Clearly, thank them for their time, thank you for the agreement, the purpose of the meeting, the process we're going to follow, the benefit to you, check time, check questions, get them to agree to questions before you ask them. Make the question sound important. I really need to. It's important to. It's a key thing that I understand more about your business. First meeting skills can be summarized with these few points. It does work online. There's no reason why it shouldn't, but you need to change the way you communicate. You need to be a little more planned and prepared. Your opportunity is to discover where you can help the client. The client or prospect's opportunity is to be educated and understand what it is that ERA does, so they can decide whether it's something that may help them in the future, if not today. So the 4 keys to a first meeting are really about that purpose benefit check, getting the agenda agreed, putting in a clear 30-second, 60-second elevator pitch. But make sure your first question is perhaps focused on the appointment, focused on the meeting. What I like to call small business talk. I really don't think today in the modern world small talk around travel or weather is really appropriate. Let's get to the point. Mr. Prospect, from what you've told me, can I ask what it was that led you to see me today? Mr. Prospect, I really appreciate that time is short today, so let me get straight to the point. Apart from the COVID-19 challenge, what are 3 or 4 of the biggest priorities or the biggest challenges your business is facing in the next 12 months or so? Or what were the challenges your business was facing before COVID-19 came along, and are they still current? Now, these questions are key, and I would suggest you practice and develop these. Soon as you've made the first key questions introduction, you move into consulting. And consulting is all about questioning. As we said before, telling is not selling, only asking questions is selling. And these are the 4 categories of question: open and closed, high impact, and TED. Open are factual questions: who, where, what. Closed are about confirmation. They start with a verb, end with a yes or no. Do you, can you, does it? Have I understood correctly that? High impact questions are subjective questions. They're not factual. They require some thought by the person answering them. Let's imagine, what if? What's most important to you? What are some of the challenges? What's your opinion? How do you feel about? How confident are you? And TED questions will be asked after one of the previous 3 questions. Could you tell me more about? Can you explain? Could you give me an example? Can you describe in more detail? Now, some advanced questioning techniques include putting a number into any question, keeping the question short and clear and clean. Don't overcomplicate the question, and don't ask multiple questions. And make it sound important. For example, let's imagine, Mr. Client, that we were to start a project. What are the 3 or 4 cost categories you would like us to look at first? That's a bit of a long question, but it's hopefully nice and clear. Right. Can you explain to me how you currently monitor some of your largest suppliers in the business? Okay. What 3 or 4 of your current suppliers, which 3 or 4 suppliers cause you the most concern in terms of future price increases? So these kind of questions, nice and clear with a number and also a multiple approach. High impact questions are the ones that are worth preparing. And if you are developing a theme in a conversation, don't just ask for factual information. Go for the subjective or the high impact question. So, for example, if you say, how much have you been able to take out of your current costs in the last 12 months? And do you feel that's enough? TED questions are also best conceptualized as an iceberg with all the really valuable information under the surface. Don't forget to listen. Summarizing, repeating back, echoing key words, building on the themes and the information you're given. Acknowledge the points the client is making and empathize, making them realize that you understand their world. Here are a few examples. They're not particularly clever or advanced, and I'm sure that you could improve upon these or embellish them and personalize them for your clients. This is designed as a 3-tier questioning model. So the initial question might be, as an online retailer, you must pay quite a lot in banking fees. How much is that a year? Is it going up? So can you just tell me what you've done to try and reduce this figure? And how does this eat into your profitability and pricing? And if it were possible to reduce the amount of fees you pay to your banking and credit card transactions, what would be a good reduction? And if we were to reduce this by 10%, what would that mean? What would the benefit of this be? Would it affect your profitability, your cash flow, your reserves, and so on? Discovery and qualification questions we've just covered. Business challenges. These are predominantly always at the front of the mind of most business managers and senior directors. How do they do things now? Current approach? Do they use consultants? What is the models and methods? Who manages suppliers, and what do they do to try and keep costs down? And where are the areas of improvement or value improvement? And what would be the benefit of those things? This, in a nutshell, is what you are trying to do in your discovery phase. Here are a few more questions. They're not that complicated. The important thing is to ask them as if the response really matters. So what are the 2 or 3 main trends in your marketplace that are really impacting your profits today? There's a question, but it's how you ask it that makes such a difference. Here's a few more. These are my favorites. So what 2 or 3 ideas do you or your team have to reduce costs in the next 12 months? Tell me, which are the most challenging cost categories to get the most value from, both in time and in effort? Maybe we could see if we can help you with those. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. If I can guarantee to make a worthwhile savings on a range of cost areas without any of your time, when would be a good time to start? So, just to recap, put a menu in front of the client that is compelling and easily understood. Make sure your first meeting is structured with the aim of getting a second meeting.